Hey, there's a guy that I want you to meet. So welcome to the podcast today. You get a chance to meet Ted Cunningham. I have heard about this guy for years as someone who's a great teacher, communicator, pastor, but also he speaks at a lot of marriage conferences and shares great truth with a lot of laughs. And this is a great, great guy. We had a lot of fun together. If you're only listening to this on audio, you may want to check it out on YouTube as well, because Ted was in the studio and he and I sat down and had a lot of laughs over a lot of different things as we talked about marriage and life and comedy and preaching. You're going to want to check it out. So today, you're going to get to learn a little bit more about how to have a great marriage, how to survive some of the ups and downs, and hopefully you'll laugh a little along the way. So here's my conversation with pastor, author, YouTuber, Ted Cunningham. Hey, we're here with Ted Cunningham. Man, this is a real treat for me because I've heard so much about you over the years. Watched some of your videos, which are hilarious, which I want to ask you about a couple of things. But for our listeners that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, today, as at this very moment, celebrating 28 years of marriage to my wife, Amy.
And you're spending it with me.
Yeah, just for another 30, 40 minutes, and then I'm heading home. We met on a blind date at Liberty University in 1995, got married in 1996. We lived here in Dallas for a little while, went to Dallas Seminary, was the worship pastor at First Baptist Little Elm, Texas, back in 98, 99. Okay. And then we started a church in 2002 in Branson, Missouri.
Wow.
With Gary Smalley. And we're now in our 23rd year. And so I'm the senior pastor. My wife leads a lot of the environments and ministries there. We have 2 grown children, Corinne and Carson, and my daughter Corinne is married.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have a son-in-law now. So we're empty nesters, brand new empty nest season.
So are we, and I love it, and she hates it.
Yeah, so. What are the ages of your kids?
22 and 20.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right where we're at.
Yeah. One's engaged. Okay, so I want to just jump right in. Gary Smalley. Now, a lot of people know him from the 5 Love Languages.
That's Gary Chapman.
That's Gary Chapman.
But let me tell you a story.
Cut that.
No, don't cut it. You got to leave that in, and here's why. The number of times people brought that book to Gary Smalley to sign.
Oh, that's awesome.
And guess Gary never fought it. He grabbed it and signed Gary Chapman and handed it back to him.
So there's people out there.
But I can't. I lost count. I could not add up the number of times people walked up to him at airports and restaurants and even at churches where his name is on the board that says Gary Smalley Seminar. I love the 5 Love Languages.
I wonder how many people thought Gary Chapman, the author, was married to Amy Grant for a while.
Yeah, I bet.
Okay, Gary Smalley. What did he do for your life? Because he's blessed a lot of people, a lot of marriages. I know he had a huge impact for you. And then helping you start a church. How does that even happen?
Yeah, so Gary came into our life at a time when we were going through a very difficult church season. So I was, from Dallas Seminary, called to be the senior pastor of a small church in Forsyth, Missouri. And the church was going through a lot of turmoil. And at 26 years old, new seminary graduate, I'm like, I'll fix this. This will be no problem.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I've had all that. And so it got bad real quick. And the founding pastor of the church ended up coming back after my 11 months there at the church. But they took me before the church to remove me by vote. It was unsuccessful, so I had to stay. And that is when Gary heard about our story and called us, invited us to breakfast at Bob Evans, because all great life-change in Branson happens in Bob Evans restaurant.
Or Lambert's.
Or Lambert's. Yes, you're going to have to explain that one. That's the
home of the throat rolls. Google
the throat rolls. So we started meeting with Gary and didn't know he was going to become a mentor and, dearest friend in life at the time. He was just helping me process through anger as a 26, 27-year-old.
Right.
And we ended up planting a church in Branson, Missouri with Gary at a movie theater. Gary's been with the Lord now over 8 years. And The greatest honor you can pay me is when someone will come up to me at an event and go, I heard, Gary, just a little bit in your talk tonight. So whether it's mannerisms or content, but I had an editor a couple of years ago. I turned a book in, and she came back to me and said, I need you to start building your own credibility and stop quoting Gary. And I said, find me a new editor, because I just think, to pay honor where honor is due.
Yeah.
And I quote him every weekend when I travel, and he truly, left a mark in our life. When I think about the Paul-Timothy relationship, I still very much feel like Timothy. So, yeah. Love the guy. Miss him.
Yeah, what a gift. Okay, so you start preaching. You're out of seminary. You've got it all figured out, obviously.
Yeah, I was able.
At some point, you figure out you're funny, and it becomes part of your presentation. Because there are some guys that are accidentally funny. There are some guys that are just knock-knock joke funny. There's some guys that it's just in them. They can make things funny. At what point did you think, okay, this is the way I preach. This is the way I communicate?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, because this weekend here in Dallas, Chuck Swindoll will preach his last sermon as senior pastor of Stonebriar Community Church. He was the president of Dallas when I was there, and 90 years old, getting ready to retire as senior pastor. Definitely earned his sheet cake. I hope it's a big sheet cake they're giving him.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people don't know this about him. He almost didn't go into ministry because of his sense of humor. He just thought the pulpit and ministry too serious. It's not about laughter, and he just loved humor, loved laughter. And so I was a student under his teaching when he was the president, and it was like he gave me permission to lean into my personality rather than deny it. Because I think what happens with a lot of seminaries is they try to get your personality out of you, and here's the formula, here's how you preach. And so I always felt freedom to use humor. And then I meet Gary, and I start speaking with Gary, traveling with Gary. And Gary wouldn't call himself a comedian, but he used humor. And he used humor in every talk, and that's what opened the door, for his teaching. And so I just used the same thing, humor. And Gary would help me, craft stories and even jokes. I got to tell you, he one time, he would make me get up and say things like to introduce him. His favorite one, when he was having some severe health problems, we would stand on the stage together, and if the lights were bright, he would always feed me these lines, and he would you say this, and I want you. And he loved this one where I'd look up and kind of squint, and I'd go, "Hey guys, do you mind turning down these bright lights?" Because now when Gary sees a bright light, he starts walking toward it. That was one of his favorites, because so he used a lot of humor. So that's where I started. I just used a lot of humor. And Gary would be like, hey, you have to, no matter what you're teaching, they need to laugh every 5 to 7 minutes. And so that would be humor, where you tell a story and there's a funny ending. That was Gary's craft, and that's what he did very well. Comedy is really measured at 3, 4, 5 laughs a minute. So you're not just telling a 3 or 4 minute story that has a funny ending. You're like premise, punchline, premise, punchline, premise, punchline. And started doing more of that, where I would open with a bit that had 7, 10 layers of punchline off of one premise.
Right.
And then I would end with that. Found myself doing that more and more at events. And when I was able to put together the first hour, this is why I appreciate guys right now like Nate Bargatze. I mean, for this guy to come out with a new hour every year.
It's crazy.
Every hotel I go to, I ask if they have a gym. I don't even have clothes that I could work out in. There's no way. I'm like, is it 24 hours? I was going to start tonight at midnight. So I was wondering if that's... What I've learned, what's easier than working out is just tell people that you used to weigh 300 pounds. That's a lot. They don't know, So I've never weighed 300 pounds, but I look pretty amazing for a guy that used to weigh 300 pounds.
Crazy impressive. I mean, it's like... I don't think people for you to get the laughs, because everybody, you and I have stories all the time. We have to come up with illustrations for messages, but to get that fresh 3 and 5 laughs a minute. He's able to pull that off, and I am super impressed with that.
And it's all from his life, too.
It's all observational.
Yeah. And at some point, you're thinking, he's going to run out of funny anecdotes from his life, don't you think?
Well, he has a mentor told him that's why, he's big now. He's at the top of his game above,
right.
The greats in comedy. And it's like, you can't fly private. You have to fly Delta. Because Delta's where you're going to get the stories. Nobody wants to hear your hard life on a private jet. They want to hear what happened to you when you stood in line at the bathroom at the Atlanta airport. That is where the comedy comes from.
Who are your comedic influences? Obviously Nate, but in your past and kind of leading in.
Well, this is going to take you back to a town you love, where I'm from, Branson, Missouri, but as I've been discipling comedian Yakov Smirnoff, the trade-off is he's helping me with comedy. So here's an 80s comedic legend who's still doing well at 70. He can pack out a theater in Branson, but he's back to doing clubs again.
And now churches are open. They're beautiful. And I walked into one, and by the door there's a little plaque, and it's in English, and it says, "Wearing a hat in church is like committing adultery." And someone wrote underneath, "I tried both of those things, and there is a difference." And it was signed Johnny Depp.
And so I would say there have been times where people have come up to me and said, you not only have watched Jim Gaffigan, but you have studied Jim Gaffigan.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had an excuse, like I had to gain all this weight for a movie. There's no movie. If you saw me eat, you would think there were multiple movies. Are they doing a live-action Shrek? This guy's gonna be perfect.
And when I think about, there's a video online you can watch where they show Michael Jackson dancing, and then they go back 20, 30 years to these clips of other dancers, and it's pretty convincing where you see 3 or 4 other dancers, and Michael Jackson took those 3 or 4 dancers, combined them to now his own style. And I would say if I were told, hey, who are your 3 that you're modeling after, it would be Brian Regan, Jim Gaffigan, and Nate Bargatze. I'm not deadpan, but my style of comedy has been described as exasperated, like I'm frustrated, and I'm just working things out on stage, which works when you do counseling and coaching. So I think you can see bits and pieces of it. There are times I get fired up at church and I'll say something and you'll hear my Jim Gaffigan when I'll go, well, he's an angry little preacher. That's Jim Gaffigan, right?
I tried that for a while. Nobody seemed to enjoy it as much as me.
But sometimes we have to do things to entertain ourselves in the grind of ministry.
Right. Yeah, because as Andrew Stanley says, you're doing a book report on the same book every week, every single week. So you gotta make it entertaining for yourself. All right, so along the way, you kind of get into the whole marriage counseling. These videos start coming out. You start speaking at conferences. What was that, kind of progression like to get you into that? And then I want to give you certain scenarios and have you help us with our marriages.
Oh, good. So I remember it started with, Gary was writing a book or 2 a year. And he would send me a chapter and say, hey, read this and tell me what you think. And then I'd send back my thoughts. And then he'd say, hey, edit this and tell me what you think. Because Gary would get up every day and speak into a microphone to get it on the screen and type it. So he was always free thought in the morning. Hey, edit this, tell me what you think. And then I ended up, going through a whole book. And I would do the sit down where you go through every chapter with a small group of people. Then as he got older and as his health struggled a little bit, and he was, like he said, it was, staying alive was a part-time job. I would travel with him. And my first conference with Gary, which he could have started me smaller, was a full house at Community Bible Church in San Antonio. And I'll never forget, they give these surveys out at the end to critique. Well, Gary's the pro marriage and family guy, and he's a pro speaker. We probably had that many out of 2,000 people. We had a pretty good stack of surveys, and Gary had me read them. I only read a few, going, well, I should give this up pretty quick. This isn't something I should be doing forever. But to learn how to take that and to adjust, and Gary would, help me with that, work through. So I would just go and do one session, and he would do 5. But if you knew Gary, he was so all over the place, just in his personality too. And my favorite one was in Memphis, where he's supposed to do the last session, and we couldn't find him. I'm looking off camera right now at his son-in-law, and we couldn't find him. And I had to go on and do the last session with like his notes and everything. Gary had found the bridal suite in the church and was fast asleep. He in dark room, just sound asleep. And so those were the moments of working with Gary. So I would do more and more. And toward the end, I mean, there was one event we went to, and when we showed up, he really wasn't able to speak. But I know the Lord worked all that out. It was at a church where the pastor was actually in the ICU in his last days, and Gary went and spent time with him at the hospital, and I did all 6 sessions of the conference. And so,
wow.
And, Gary got so many invites. These were the humbling days early in ministry 20 years ago, where I would go to places that Gary wouldn't go to. Mm-hmm. And I always loved those introductions. It was sometimes a pastor, let's say like Rusty George, getting up there trying to go, well, we tried to get Gary for this thing, and he wouldn't come. He wasn't available. So this Tim Cunningham from... Hey, but that's how you do it. That's how you get started.
That's right.
And you're grateful for it, and you appreciate it, and you get all that feedback. And so... I've created and worked through, with my own content, but you're gonna hear bits and pieces of Gary Smalley throughout all of what I teach.
Hey, let me interrupt this for just a moment. Our new book, 40 Days to Easter, is available now on Amazon. Pick up this book, start by March the 10th, and over the next 42 days, you get a one short reading prepping you for Easter as we journey through the book of Mark. 40 Days to Easter by Rusty George, found now on Amazon.
Okay, so from the most recent video I watched of yours, and goodness, it's probably 10, 12 years old, but you had a bit about HGTV.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tee you up here because I think a lot of guys would resonate with this, and I feel the same way. You said, if I ever meet Chip Gaines, I'm going to punch him in the nose.
I'm going to punch him right in the face.
So talk about just the journey of your wife watching HGTV and what that impacted you. And
well, what's funny about that story is Chip's parents go to Cross Creek, Colleyville, Texas, and the first time I was at their church sharing that story, Chip's dad walked up to me and said, "So you want to punch my son in the face, huh?" I said, "I am," so because he looks like an older version of Chip Gaines. I said, "Oh," he goes, "Chip would love that joke," and I know one day I'm going to be sharing that somewhere. And Chip's going to walk out on stage or something and he's going to challenge me to the fight. But I say he's ruining our marriage because I come home and Amy's been watching HGTV and she wants to remove a wall.
That's right.
In the dining room. And I have to go online and find a term to save our marriage, and that term is load-bearing. Every wall in our home is load-bearing. You don't touch one or the whole house comes down. Don't tell Amy that we actually have that, fabricated beams that the whole house could. We could.
Well, they're figuring that out.
We
now.
could remove every interior wall, and the house would stand just fine.
Because Chip started doing that. He started putting beams in.
Oh, Chip.
Yeah.
Oh, Chip.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
and the shiplap.
Oh, yeah.
If I have one more, I think we're coming out of the shiplap phase, though.
We are.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
That's good. But we're in the Ozarks, so
it
may just be starting. Whatever you're coming out of, we're just picking up shiplap. We should try shiplap.
Okay, so. All right, so talk to our marriages out there. I want you to give a little advice to a couple that's dating, thinking of getting married, okay? A couple that's newlyweds,
okay,
and then a couple that's in the throes of raising teenagers.
Wow, you're just going to skip the preschool and elementary? That's the easiest.
You know what? I was just trying to keep it with the rule of 3, but if you want to go with an extra, that's fine.
Well, I always start with the dating to encourage couples, because you know what the average length of dating is before marriage?
What is it now?
2 to 3 years.
That's crazy.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it is.
And there's a lot of reasons for the delay. So I'm not for rushing marriage. I always have to make that clear. I do not believe you should rush marriage. But I'm also for avoiding the unnecessary delay of it.
Yes.
And so, the traditional milestones of relationship formation of adulthood that have been true of our parents, grandparents, our generation, and even the kids we're raising, leave home, finish school, get a job, get married, start a family.
Yep.
Okay, our grandparents did those in a very short period of time, if not the same week. Like, it was fast. What we're doing now, and dating's in this, is we've just spread those out. We tell our kids, you really can only do one at a time. So when you're in college, don't work. Get all the degrees you can. But then get your job. Get really established in that job. Save some money, And so marriage, instead of being the cornerstone that you built a life with someone on, it's become the capstone. It's how Mark Regeneris at the University of Texas puts it. And so we say, do all of this. And so we've got these spreadsheet delays, work delays, saying, there's just so much I need to accomplish when most of us got married and we grew up together. And so I just want to encourage, desire is a good thing. So if you're in that sparks season, and that attraction and chemistry phase of the relationship, desire says, I want you. But exclusivity says, I want only you. And so I challenge the dating couples, don't fear commitment. I mean, and don't fear, we don't have it all figured out. Know what the negotiables and the non-negotiables are. I want someone who has character, even knowing that still has to grow. But you can get married and grow up together. For the newlywed couple, I always start by talking to the church, because that's probably the group we neglect the most. Most churches I go to have strong premarital ministry and strong crisis ministry, but nothing in the middle.
Right.
So it's kind of I kind of view it's like churches that don't have the young adults ministry, that once they get out of student ministry and go to college, it's just like there's this. What are we doing with them? We kind of treat newlyweds in the church the same way. So what I encourage newlyweds to do everywhere I go is, and this works in Branson again, country music capital of the world. Every marriage is a duet in need of great backup singers. So you just had a wedding where you invited 100+ people. Treat them more than just guests. Treat them as backup singers. You don't need a choir. You just need a few people who are doing what the daughters of Jerusalem did for Solomon and the Shulamite woman. Because when we read them in the Song of Solomon 1:4, they say, we rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. So find a couple that is rejoicing, delighting, and praising your love. And some churches call them mentors, some call them coaches. But even if your church doesn't have anything official, you don't need anything official to find that seasoned couple. And the key is, you want to find somebody who's not just been married 30 or 40 years, but they enjoy life together.
Right.
You can see them. And the Institute of Family Studies did a great study, and they found that 78% of couples who regularly attend church together report that they are either very satisfied or extremely satisfied in their marriage. So think about that. You start adding other spiritual disciplines to that, reading the Bible together, being on mission together, giving together towards something other than yourselves. Well, now you're up to 90%.
Right.
And again, not just staying married, extremely happy.
Right.
So for me, engaged couples come back, they start getting into the job and, getting going, setting up the new place. You have to think about the quality of your friendships, because the quality of your friends will determine the quality of your marriage.
Right.
So whether your church has a program or not, you need to find good backup singers.
Right.
And then
go ahead and deal with preschool.
I would just say with all kids in general, Genesis 2:24 we often look to as a marriage verse, but it's also a parenting verse.
Okay.
For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother. And so that is not a verse that needs to start at the wedding. Like, you're preparing your kids all along the way to leave home.
Right.
So what we say in our home and at our church is parenting is a journey from control to influence. So when your kids are very small, it's the most control you'll ever have. But with every year of your child's life, you're losing control and hopefully replacing it with influence. You and I have adult kids now. It's all we got.
Right.
And the fastest way for me to squander influence is to be controlling. So when my kids are small, and I would tell them when they were small, we love you, you're a welcomed addition to this home, but you're not the center of it. Prioritize the marriage in the home, whether you have toddlers or whether you have teenagers, because you're giving that as a gift to your kids, seeing that, one, the world doesn't revolve around you. You're not the center of this home. You're not the center of the universe. And you'll one day start a family of your own. And so I've always tried to paint a picture, and we think of marriage and parenting as separate, but I want my marriage to be a part of my parenting because I want to paint a picture for my kids that they go, it's the mission statement of Silver Dollar City in Branson, creating memories worth repeating. We love to replace that memories with marriages, creating marriages worth repeating. Let your marriage be something that your kids go, I want that. I want to enjoy life with my spouse one day like mom and dad did. They really enjoyed being together. They were on mission together. They got up thinking about others. I just want that for my kids. And that starts while your kids are in the home watching. They see everything you do. They hear everything you say. They forget nothing. And then they repeat. So
I've been amazed as my kids have gotten older, the things that they talk about and remember, I don't remember. It was a throwaway comment. It happened on the way to school or, sitting at dinner. It's not the Disneyland experiences. They don't reminisce about, remember when we all went to Disney and stayed for the fireworks and Dad drove home angry. It wasn't that. It was, Dad, you said something in the kitchen one day. It's the weirdest things that they remember.
That's good.
And I think about the things I remember about my parents, too. It was just these little one-off statements they'd make.
We were sitting around the campfire this spring. This is a true story. We're sitting around the campfire, and I don't know why this came out of my mouth, but I said, I don't really have any regrets with my parenting. And then for the next hour, they shared with me some real concrete examples for me to hang on to and to hold on to. After about an hour, I'm like, okay, we're good. Like, yeah, you're good. All right, no, that's fine. That's fine. So I think you and I don't remember because we try to block it out.
He just repressed it. We need a good therapist to pull that out of us, or pull it out of them, probably. You've been doing this a while. How are marriages different now? Now, you mentioned the whole, the gaps in between the stages of the whole before you're married.
Yeah.
But what are marriages facing now that maybe they weren't before, or it's just the same thing but in a different way?
Yeah. So to me, it's like every person and every couple has a capacity. And I'll hear this with parents. They'll tell me it's like, they're tired, so they feel like they're doing something wring. It's like, you're tired because parenting, it has its challenges. You're exhausted, But to me, I want to focus on what matters most. And we have so much noise coming at us every day, and we don't have the capacity. We really don't have the capacity to handle everything, all the information. I mean, if you were to change every day based on the algorithm throwing stuff at you, like you need to be doing this, you need to be, I'm 50 now, and I used to get exercise equipment, and I haven't purchased any of that. So now I'm getting do you have a chair? Could you just, I can give you a 4-minute exercise every day. That's how bad it's gotten with me, 50 years old. But I told Amy, I can't wake up every day and get 10 new things to do.
Right.
And I think couples today, get off the devices, get off the, 5 things we need to change. I tell couples this at marriage conferences. The worst thing you could do is leave here with 12 things you're going to change about your marriage. You can write all 12 down, but start with one.
Yep,
Both of you agree with the one, because this is Dave Ramsey's debt snowball. Get energy and excitement off of paying off that little one, and it builds, because marriage skills transfer as well. Couples are just trying to tackle too much and accomplish, with everything being thrown at them online. And I'm just like, just know what your capacity as a couple is. Stay focused on what matters most. You don't have to say everything or post everything you're thinking, and psychologists today call it emotional flooding. And it's finding its way into your marriage where you're just emotionally, physically, and relationally overwhelmed because you just have too much coming at you. And one of my preaching buddies gave up social media altogether. And at first I was like, who told you were allowed to do that? You can't
Right.
do that. Who gave you permission to do that? And he said, well, I just found myself preaching mad all the time. And that's a good example with couples. Like, I think what overwhelmed feelings do you have? What stress do you have in your life? And how much of it is just unnecessary clutter?
Right.
To just simplify things. Get back to being focused. So that's probably, and I do a lot of work with the American Association of Christian Counselors, and Tim Clinton's always saying we don't have a mental health crisis. We have a mental health catastrophe, because everybody's lonely, depressed, they're anxious. And a lot of that we're just bringing on ourselves by too many inputs. We need to get back to just the simplicity of life as a couple.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap up with this. I want you just to give me 2 or 3, maybe 4 of your favorite learnings from Gary Smalley.
Ooh, yeah.
Not Gary Chapman, but Gary Smalley. I mean, obviously you spent a lot of time with him. You quote him a lot. But just like personally, I'll never forget this.
All right. Honor was his number one. And so his magazine ministry was Homes of Honor, so it was all about esteeming people as highly valuable. And he did that. I mean, that's why when you were in his presence, you were the most valuable person, in the room, and he treated you as such. So that was one, honor. The second one is codependency, and I quote this all the time. Codependency is relying on people, places, or things as your source of life. So his passion was Jesus is your source, your spouse is not. And most of you think you have a spouse problem. You really have a source problem. And so I say this in counseling all the time. Jesus is your source. Satan is your enemy. Your spouse is your companion. And if you want to experience high levels of marital satisfaction, never treat your spouse like the source or the enemy. Your marriage definitely has an enemy. It's just not your spouse. And so we're called to walk side by side, with each other through the grind of life. And then at the end of his life, Gary became so passionate about the memorization and meditation of Scripture. And, basically the modern psychology has the, change your thoughts, change your life. But Gary was like, well, the Scripture teaches us, get the Word of God in your heart, because above all else, guard your heart's the wellspring of life. Every word you speak, every action you take, it flows from your heart. That changed my parenting, because Gary was the one that taught me, do not obsess over the behavior of your children. Obsess over the hearts of your children. And so stay focused on their hearts, because that's where all the behavior comes from.
Right.
I could go on. You know, and just keep going on.
I do, but
yeah, and
you got a flight to catch.
We haven't even talked about your passion for Kansas City. We share that now in common. Kansas City Chiefs. Another Super Bowl's on the horizon.
Football, sir?
Yes. It's a sport where you throw a ball with your hands.
So in football, there is no kicking?
There's a little kicking. You kick the ball to get points.
How many points, sir?
Sometimes 1 and sometimes 3.
I mean, yeah, we keep losing players and we just keep winning games.
Yeah, it's hard. It's
I
hard.
know. It's really tough. I now know what the Patriot fans felt like for so long. It's great. Hey, this has been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's so great to finally meet you. Thanks for having
You
me
as
on.
well.
Well, Ted, thank you so much for being here. I want to thank Clay Scroggins for helping set that up and introducing me to him, as well as the incredible people around here at Crossroads that have worked with him. Ted has just been fantastic. If you're not a subscriber to the podcast, make sure that you do that now and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, because you'll be able to catch up on all kinds of videos and content that we put out there every single week. Well, next week we'll be back with brand new content. Make sure that you check it out. And as always, keep it simple.